Okay, so in this video I'm going to have a look at solving different types of quadratic equations. So to start with, let's have a look at this fairly basic one here. Let's take x squared minus 9 equal to 0. So there are a couple of ways of doing this. So we've got to solve this equation. In other words, we've got to find out what x is here. So you can just simply, in this case, bring the 9 over to the other side, or add 9 to both sides. So you get x squared is equal to 9. Square root both sides, that will give you x is equal to plus 3 or minus 3. So in other words, square root 9, you could get plus 3 or minus 3. Another way of doing that is to, if you look at it, you can see that this will give you x squared minus 3 squared is equal to 0. 3 squared here is just 9. This is actually the difference of two squares. So we can factorize this by using the rule that you take the first one, add the second term, take the first term, subtract the second term. So this is, if you multiply these two brackets out, you'll end up with this here. So when you multiply two things together and your answer is 0, that means one of these must be 0. So in other words, x plus 3 must be 0, or x minus 3 must be 0. So that will give me, if I solve these two linear equations here, subtract 3 from this side, you get x. Subtract 3 here, you get minus 3. Over here, add 3 to this side, so you get x. And on the other side here, add 3, you get plus 3 on this side. So if we do it this way, we get plus 3 or minus 3. Here we also get minus 3 or plus 3. So that just simply means that if you take this, this equation here, x squared minus 9, as a function, and you draw it, it will look, something like this. It's a parabola, and this point here is one of our solutions here. That will be minus 3 on the x-axis, and this point here will be plus 3 on the x-axis. Okay, so that's one type you can do. I mean, another type might look like this. So we can take, let's say, 4x squared minus 10x is equal to 0. So in this particular case, if we look at both of these terms here, we need to factorize the left hand side here. So if we look at both of these terms here, we can find a common factor and factorize the left hand side. So we have 4 and 10 here, so a common factor between 4 and 10 would be 2. We also have an x squared and an x, so the common factor there would be x. So we can take that outside the bracket. So if you look at it, what would we need to multiply this 2x by to give me 4x squared? Well, I'd multiply the 2 by a 2 and the x by an x. So in other words, 2x times 2x will give me 4x squared. So what about the minus 10x? Well, I'm multiplying a plus by a minus. Sorry, I'm multiplying a plus here by something to give me a minus. So it will have to be a minus here. Plus times minus will give me this minus. 2 times what will give me 10? Well, 2 times 5 will give me 10. And x times what will give me x? Well, just 1. So in other words, 2x times 5, 2x times minus 5, in fact, will give me minus 10x. And that again is equal to 0 here. So what I've done is taken the left-hand side here and factorized it using common factor method. So now again I have this 2x multiplied by this 2x minus 5, and my answer is 0. So that means one of these two must be 0. In other words, 2x must be 0, or the 2x minus 5 must be 0. So if 2x is equal to 0, then x must be 0. Because again, if you multiply two things together here, this 2 by the x, and your answer is 0, one of these must be 0. Well, the 2 is obviously not equal to 0, so it must be the x. Another way of looking at it is divide both sides by 2. Divide the left-hand side by 2, and you get x. Divide the right-hand side by 2, you'll get 0. 0 divided by anything is just 0. Now, on this side here, we can add 5 to both sides, so we get 2x is equal to 5. And then here, divide by 2, so you get x is equal to 5 over 2. So in this particular case, our two solutions are 0 and 5 over 2. Okay, so that's another type you can do. Let's have a look at another one. So let's have a look at this one here, x squared plus 9x plus 20 is equal to 0. Now in this particular case we've got what's called a quadratic trinomial on the left. It's quadratic because we have an x squared here, and it's a trinomial because we've got 3 terms here. So usually there are a few ways of factorizing this on the left hand side, and I have done videos on how to factorize quadratic trinomials. But the quickest way, if you can do it, is this way here. Just draw 2 brackets, factorize the first term here, and put your answer here. In other words, x times x will give me x squared. Look at the last term here, which is 20. What are all the factors of 20? Well, you've got 1 times 20, you've got 2 times 10, 3 won't go in, so you've got 4 times 5, and then you've got 5 times 4, so we're just back to this one again. So these are all the pairs of factors that we can use. Now we want to pick 2 that will also not only give me 20, but in this case, you know, add or subtract to give me 9. So I'm going to look at 5 and 4 here. So if I put the 5 here and the 4 here, I want to multiply 5 by 4 to give me 20. I want to multiply 5 by 4, in fact, to give me plus 20. So I need a minus times minus, or a plus times a plus. Now this is plus here, so it's actually going to be plus times plus here rather than minus times minus. Again, if we multiply these two together to give us 0, that means x plus 5 must be equal to 0, or x plus 4 must be equal to 0. And again, if we solve this here, subtract 5 from both sides, you get x is equal to minus 5. Or here, subtract 4 from both sides, you get x is equal to minus 4. So in this particular case, our 2 values for x, our 2 solutions are minus 5 and minus 4. So you know that graph would look something like this. It would be down here. It's a parabola again. This would be minus 5. This here would be minus 4. And we get a parabola like this. Okay, so that's one way of solving it. Now another way of solving these type of quadratic trinomials is to use a formula. The quadratic formula it's called, or some people call it a minus b formula. So the way you would do that is you would just solve for x by saying x is equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And you can use this for any quadratic equation that looks like this: ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. So you've got some number times x squared plus some number times x plus some number equal to 0. All you've got to do is look at whatever this number is, look at whatever this number is, include the sign, look whatever number this here is, including the sign, stick them into this formula, and it'll work out your x's for you. So let's see, let's take an example of that. So let's take, for example, 5x squared minus 16x plus 9 equal to 0. So in this case, usually what you would do is write down what a, b, and c are. Well, in this particular case, a is 5. It's the coefficient of the x squared, whatever is in front of the x squared, including the sign. There's a plus here. Now b then in this case is the coefficient of the x. So the coefficient of the x is minus 16. And c then is the number independent of x, the number with no x attached to it. So c is plus 9. So there's a, b, and c. All we got to do now is stick them into this formula here. So we know that x is going to be equal to minus b. So b is minus 16. So minus minus 16 is plus 16. We've got plus or minus, because remember we're going to end up with 2 answers here. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Put the b in brackets, so include the sign, minus 16, and square it. Put it in brackets because remember you're squaring this minus as well. You're not only squaring the 16. If you write it like this, that's a different answer altogether. Here you're only squaring the 16. Here you're squaring the minus as well. Remember b includes the minus, so you've got to square the minus as well. Okay, so let's have a look then at the rest of it here. We've got a minus 4ac, so it's going to be minus 4 times a here, which is 5, and c here, which is 9. Again, put them in brackets. Underneath here we've got twice a. Twice a here is twice times 5. 2 times 5. So let's just work all of this out then. Now usually the first thing you would do here is just work out what's underneath this square root symbol here. Work all of this out first. So here we're going to end up with 16 plus or minus excuse me, 16 squared. Now it's minus 16 squared. So you've got to square the minus. And minus squared is plus. So when you square minus 16, you get 256. 256 goes in here. Now that's plus. Remember to square the minus. It's a common mistake here not to square that minus. Here we end up with a minus 4 times a plus 5 times a plus 9. Well, let's do the sign first. Minus times plus is minus, and that minus times this plus is minus. And now we've just got to do 4 times 5 times 9. 4 times 5 times 9 is 180. So we've got to put that over. 2 times 5 on the bottom is just 10. So here we've got 16 plus or minus the square root of 256 minus 180 is 76. And on the bottom we've got 10. Now there are a couple of ways you might be asked to write this answer. You might be asked to write it in surd form, or you might be asked to write it to 1 decimal place or 2 decimal places. So let's just have a look at the different ways you can write the answer. Let's just take a surd form first. Well, surd form just means that you leave in the square root here. So you end up here with x being equal to 16 plus the square root of 76 over 10, or x is equal to 16 minus the square root of 76 over 10. So you'd split up the plus and minus here at this stage. So I mean, you can divide in the 10 into both of these. So you get 16 over 10. I mean, you can take this as far as you want, plus, now the square root of 76 is 2 root 19, 2 square root 19. Now that would be, your calculator will actually do that for you, and that's over 10 as well. And here then you've got x minus 16, sorry, x is equal to, I should say, 16 over 10 minus 2 square root 19 over 10. So just to finish that off then, I mean, you can divide this so you get 1.6, or you can just leave it as it is. So let's call it 1.6 here, and this here would just become, well, 2 into 2 is 1, 2 into 10 is 5, so you just get square root 19 over 5. I've just divided the 2 into the 5 here. That's the same on this side. You get x is equal to 1.6 minus root 19 over 5. Now you might be asked to do these to maybe 1 decimal place or 2 decimal places. Well, if you work all of this out on your calculator, you will get, on this side you'll get 2.4717, goes on for a while, forever I think, and here you'll get x is equal to 0.72822 and so on. So you might be asked to do to maybe 1 decimal place. Let's do it to 1 decimal place, so that's just here and here. So this here would be 2.5 to 1 decimal place. To 1 decimal place. Here you're looking at x being equal to 0.7. 0.7 here to 1 decimal place. Okay, so there's the different methods for working out, for solving, I should say, quadratic equations.